Okay, so first off, I'd like to acknowledge that the last video stirred up a lot of feelings that people have towards this sensitive topic. Um, by no means was I trying to prompt like a firestorm in the comment section or paint anyone in a negative light. Um, I have interest in learning about this situation. Um, which I'm gathering is very political, touchy, is some people's reality. Um, but I just wanted to grasp a general concept of what is going on. My goal is to watch the middle ground video between the Israelis and the Palestinians. Um, but I didn't want to just go into the video blind without knowing any of the context or anything behind with the questions or the points that would be brought up. Um, in regards to the video, maybe it was a poor choice. I'm somewhat familiar with Vox as I've seen maybe two or three videos of theirs before, so I knew the name. Um, there certainly was many other videos that I came across, but I just didn't know like the channels. So I thought maybe Vox would have been pretty neutral, a lot more. But, a lot of you have pointed out that it was a little bit more biased. So, as I mentioned in my post, I'm more than happy to check out other videos from different perspectives. Some of you have linked me some of those already, which has been great. Thank you so much. Um, as I mentioned, I'm not here to pick and choose sides, make any sort of declaration of whose land it is, whose land it isn't. I simply wanted like spark notes on the topic. Um, Clearly, this is much more in depth of an issue than a 10-minute video can kind of do full justice for. Um, but again, like I have no dog in this fight. So if this type of video or content isn't something you want to watch, I fully understand. Um, I can only suggest maybe waiting for the next video to come out, which might intrigue you, unsubscribing, I don't know, just ignoring the video. I don't know, but hopefully we can keep the conversations going and continue to learn a little bit more with each video. Um, with that being said, let's actually get into today's video. So for today's video, somebody linked me the Ben Shapiro version of this, or viewpoint on this, I should say, or breakdown. And I like Ben Shapiro. I like a lot of his content. I like what the Daily Wire does. Between him, Matt Walsh, Brett Cooper, the content's pretty good. Do I agree with everything Ben says? By far, no. Same with Matt Walsh. I don't agree with a lot of things that he says too. But it's always good to hear from the other side, as you guys have pointed out. So probably be broken up into, I'm gonna guess maybe 2, 3 parts. He does like a 40-minute video on this, so um, as it says here, a comprehensive history. So yeah, let's get into it.
Alrighty, so today we're going to talk about the history of the Israeli-Palestinian Arab conflict. In order to discuss that history, we have to go back in time, like way, way back in time. First, this particular video is sponsored by our friends over at ExpressVPN. The Jewish homeland has always been the dream in Israel. Okay, to understand how tiny this slot of land is, you kind of have to look at this map. Okay, so this tiny area right here covers Israel and actually some other countries.
Okay, so Europe, Russia, and Africa, and Israel is right in there. Okay.
Okay, the entire map, if you were to zoom out and take a look at the Arab world, what you would see is this enormous swath of the globe and then you would see like this tiny pinprick about half the size of New Jersey, and that constitutes modern-day Israel. It's a very, very small plot of land. And if you were to look at this area, like the narrowest part of the land is currently constituted, you'd be looking at about 9 miles wide right here. The Jewish history with regard to
9 miles wide. Sorry, I got to do the conversion from miles to kilometers because that's what we use here in Canada. I think for every 1 mile, it's like close to 2 kilometers. It's like 1.6 or 1.7. So at 9 miles wide, what is that, like 14 and a half kilometers? It's not that wide, no.
the land of Israel begins approximately 1300 BCE, before the birth of Christ. Moses.
BCE, that's before Common Era, right? And then I think it goes CE, which is just Common Era.
Leaves Egypt somewhere around 1300 BCE. There are various sort of attempts to date this. A little bit later in the century, Joshua enters the land. He crosses the Jordan River, right? So the Jewish people go out here. They pass through the Red Sea. They end up wandering around in the desert, and then they enter the land of Canaan, right, which is this whole area. By about 1000 BCE, the kingdom.
So the land of a Canaan, okay. Kingdom of David is established.
Of David is established. Jerusalem is the capital, right? This is the first that Jerusalem matters sort of in world history. Remember, still 1,000 years before Christ. By 957 BCE, the first Temple of Solomon is built. It is built in Jerusalem. Now remember, this is still a good 1,600 years before the rise of Islam. There's a lot of infighting among the Jews. There's a separation between the kingdom of Judah and the kingdom of Israel. Those are two separate kingdoms. And you end up.
Yeah, isn't there something called like Judea, I think?
With ancient maps that look sort of like this, right? This ancient map is the kingdom of Israel, which was 10 of the tribes. And then you have the kingdom of Judah, which is the one that was governed.
Okay. So within Judah, Jerusalem is located. Or the kingdom of Judah, Jerusalem is in. Yeah, okay. And then you have the Philistine state, which that's what they call Palestine, no? Or later on, maybe?
By the Davidic line. The first exile that happens to the Jews happens in 722 BCE when the Assyrians rush in from the north. You can see the Assyrian Empire at the top of this map. They rush in from the north. Then there's another exile that takes place in 586 BCE. This is the Babylonian exile. So from way the hell out here on this map, the Babylonian.
Okay, so Babylon is there. Wow, so they crossed all that land just to get to Jerusalem to exile the Jews from that area?
Come in, they conquer the land, and they destroy the first temple. In 515 BCE, there's this great return from Babylonia, and the second temple is built. In 63,
whoa,
there's this great return from Babylonia, and the second.
Is that the actual temple? That looks amazing. It always blows my mind, the architecture and everything that they did back in the day. Like, take the pyramids, for example, like moving all of those ginormous stones. And I think a lot of people still to this day don't understand how it was done. I'm gonna guess with a lot of slave power, but even then, you know, to move one of those blocks, especially at an angle to get to the higher portions of the pyramid, that is a lot of force. Very interesting.
Temple is built. In 63 BCE, the Romans take over. So Pompey, at that point, not the emperor, but just a general, takes over the area, and Judea becomes a vassal state. And Judea remains a vassal state.
Okay, yeah, Judea, yeah, okay. Man, there was a lot of people that wanted this area.
State of the Roman Empire, basically through the end of an independent Jewish kingdom. It's called Judea at this point. It is not called Israel. 70 CE is the destruction of Jerusalem. There's a Jewish revolt against the Roman government because of bad administrative practices and because of infighting and because of a crackdown on religious practice, and Jerusalem is destroyed. And not only is Jerusalem destroyed, the second temple is destroyed at the time as well. 130 to 136 CE, there is a massive revolt by the Jews.
So are these temples the ones by any chance that have like the Western Wall and stuff like that, where all the praying happens, like the Wailing Wall? Are these the temples that he's referring to?
Under a general named Shimon Bar Kokhba, Simon Bar Kokhba. The Bar Kokhba revolt was extremely damaging to the Roman Empire. They had to expend extraordinary resources in order to stop the Bar Kokhba revolt, which is why it was almost an independent kingdom for a solid 4 or 5 years there. They renamed the area Palestine as an insult to the Jews. That's why it was named Palestine. So when people say historic Palestine, understand that the existence of Palestine was meant as a name, as an insult to the Jews, who were considered the historic inhabitants of the land, and it is first used in 136 CE, a solid 1,200 years after the Jews first enter the land at a minimum.
So the historical Jews that lived there were given that name as an insult, and that's how we come to know the name Palestine. Okay, interesting.
Now, finally, we get to the founding of Islam. So Islam finally is founded around the 7th century CE. Arabs take over this land in about 636 CE. In 1099, the Crusades.
Not off topic, I guess. It's still on topic of this history lesson. Do you guys learn this within like your schooling, and say like when the boys go to yeshiva and stuff like that? Is this something that's taught, or is this something separate that you would learn on your own time, if you wanted to learn the history and dive a little deeper and stuff like that?
Crusaders decide that they are going to take back the land, and from 1099 to 1291, the Crusaders are fighting battles with the Islamic world and establish rule inside Jerusalem and inside Israel. In 1291, the Crusaders are defeated, and a Muslim group called the Mamluks take over. They rule for a couple of hundred years. In 1517, the Ottoman Empire, another Muslim empire, takes over the entire area. Now, understand, since the destruction of the Kingdom of Judea, there has not been a single independent state called Palestine set up any time in here. It has always just been a territory of an outlying empire.
Ah, okay. So it was the Ottoman Empire, it was the Muslak, it was such and such, but never was it ever called a state of Palestine. Okay.
And pretty sparsely populated, actually, because there wasn't a lot there, as it turns out. The Ottoman Empire, this entire time from 1517 to 1918, until the end of World War I, during that time, they really didn't want Jews settling in the land, and so they had barred Jewish land purchase. You actually could not buy land in this area if you were Jewish. Jews started to make sort of backdoor deals with local Arabs to buy their land, and so you start seeing Jews trying to escape various places from which they've been exiled for, thousands of years, back to the Holy Land. There was a constant Jewish presence here. Throughout all of these exiles, there's never no presence of Jews in, for example, Hebron or in Jerusalem or in various areas of the Holy Land. But the first major Aliyah, which is termed the Aliyah in Hebrew, that means to go up, right? Because there's a spiritual rising that takes place when you go to the Holy Land. The first Aliyah is around 1882. It's late.
Okay. So they were purchasing the land even though the Ottoman Empire had barred them from doing so, but they were doing it back channels. And the first Aliyah. Okay.
19th century, and it's mostly Russians attempting to escape pogroms that are happening in Russia. By 1897, the Zionist movement begins, and this is the idea that there's going to be an independent Jewish state in Israel. It is launched by Theodor Herzl. He's the founder of the World Zionist Organization. He is not a particularly religious Jew. He launches this after the Dreyfus Affair. The Dreyfus Affair was this famous affair in France in which there was a member of the French army who was Jewish. He was falsely accused of spying for the Austro-Hungarian Empire. It unleashed this giant wave of anti-Semitism. He was basically condemned despite evidence because of the anti-Semitism, and Herzl decided, well, anti-Semitism is too strong a threat. The Jews need some homeland to call their own. In 1917...
Okay, so we did kind of hear about that, I think, in the Vox one, where they had mentioned this gentleman with the Zionist movement, and that continued into, was it 1947? I think, if my memory is correct.
Britain declares the Balfour Declaration. This says there
maybe he'll explain this.
Will be a Jewish homeland in the area of Israel. The amount of land that was promised to the Jews was actually not just what is labeled Israel here, but also Jordan, which at this time was called Transjordan, which makes some sense in the sense that the Arab states around it were going to be Egypt, it was going to be Saudi Arabia, it was going to be Syria, it was going to be Lebanon. There are a bevy of Arab states that surround this entire region. In 1920, there.
Oh, so it wasn't just going to be that little sliver, it was going to be that plus Jordan. So it would be a much larger piece. Gotcha. Okay.
Arab pogroms against Jews in Jerusalem. So when people say that there was no conflict between Arabs and Jews until the creation of the State of Israel, that's just a lie. It's not true at all. There were major Arab pogroms against Jews in Jerusalem because Jews wanted to commit the great sin of praying at the Western Wall. This, of course, was not allowed. In 1922, this is post-World War I now, the British are given a mandate over the area of Palestine. They start walking.
So that says Transjordan there. Egypt down there, Syria, Lebanon, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and then Jerusalem. But even on this map, in the blue section, it doesn't say, like, Israel or anything, right?
Walking back the promises of the Balfour Declaration. And the Brits separate off Transjordan, and they call it Jordan, and they say that's going to go to the Arabs. In 1929, there's another major riot. Another major anti-Jewish riot in Hebron, or Hebron. The British, in response to all of this violence and all of this rioting, they decide they're going to just continually attempt to appease the Arab population in British Mandate Palestine. So they begin restricting land transfers to Jews. In 1937, the Peel Commission suggests a partition plan with control by the British retained of Tel Aviv and Jaffa and Jerusalem.
Okay. So under British rule is this orange section here, which is Jerusalem, Bethlehem, and Jaffa. The Jewish settlements was in Tel Aviv and Rahatva. And Arab and Jewish towns were Jerusalem, Haifa, Safad, Tiberias. And then Arab village was Gaza, Hebron, Beersheba, Acre, and Nazareth. Okay. But then again, the green section was just the Jewish state, and then the orange or the yellowy section was the Arab state.
And there would be like a small sliver of land Israel would get, but it would be pretty divided. It'd be like this little land here, maybe a little bit up here, and then most of the Negev, which is basically just an empty desert. By this point, Jews have been moving to Palestine in increasing numbers because anti-Semitism in Europe is getting worse, but also because there's this nascent labor and Zionist movement, and they're really making the agricultural areas flourish again. Economic growth in this region at this time is because Jews were moving in and they were bringing their resources with them, they were bringing their know-how with them, and they were working the land. And this was driving more Arab immigration to the land also, because economic activity always drives population movements. In 1939, under Arab pressure, the Brits restrict Jewish immigration to 75,000 Jews per year. The Jews are saying, listen, we have like millions of people who want to move here.
Wow. How can you limit that? Were the Jewish population back then also having 10 to 15 kids back in the day too? Because you'd reach that threshold pretty quick with just a few families.
And the Brits say, we're not doing that, 75,000 per year, because we have to get along with the Arab population. This is just before the Holocaust, obviously. And the Arabs reject this. The Arabs are very angry about this. They continue to launch low-level attacks on the British. They continue to attack Jewish populations. World War II breaks out. The Jews, including Jews who were heavily pushing the British to establish a Jewish state and to lift restrictions on Jewish immigration into British Mandate Palestine, they side with the Brits, right? They form their own divisions. They're trying to help the British. What they say is that we fight for Jewish immigration to Palestine as though there were no Germans, and we fight the Germans as if there were no British, right? That's the way the Jews see it in British Mandate Palestine. They're attempting to negotiate. The Arabs side with Hitler. Okay, during World War II, you have Hashmin al-Husseini. He is the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem.
Really? The Arabs sided with Hitler? I did not know that. Wow.
One of the Palestinian leaders at the time, the Arab leaders at the time, and he was literally meeting with Hitler, attempting to encourage Hitler to establish a final solution in the Holy Land should the Germans be able to conquer that area, which the Germans came pretty close. I mean, you had Rommel literally in Egypt, right? Rommel was over here. Okay, so fast forward, you're now after World War II. Still, the British Mandate is limiting the amount of Jewish immigration into British Mandate Palestine. because they're attempting to keep this conflict between the Jews.
So, if there was never a, are they still calling it a British mandated Palestine due to the historical Palestine that they were using as an insult? Like, why did the Britons decide to say mandated Palestine?
And the Arabs simmering at a lower level. Okay, 1947, there's a UN partition plan because now the British mandate in Palestine, they want to end it. They want to withdraw.
Okay. So now in the map looks like the Jewish state has swept around the lower section that was once the Arab state in the previous map. Okay.
Don't want to be there anymore. So the UN says, okay, we're going to vote on a partition plan. It retains Jerusalem as internationally governed. Okay, so it would not have been Jewish territory or Arab territory. It would have been internationally governed. It's just this fragmented, ridiculous state. Okay, the state for the Jews would have been like a slice here, a little bit of a slice of the coastal area here, and then the Negev desert down here. The Jews are like, give us whatever you got, right? Whatever you're going to give us, we will take. The Arabs instead decide that they're going to launch a bunch of low-level conflicts. So there's this kind of low-level, quiet war that's going on for about a year with Arabs attacking Jewish settlements and attempting to kill Jews and Jews attempting to defend themselves. May 14th, 1948, the British...
Okay. You know what? I think I'm going to take a little pause here. I know we're only... Maybe we'll get a little bit further in. Maybe we'll get to 10, 12 minutes, okay?
Mandate officially ends. Israel declares its independence, right? This is Yom HaAtzmaut, or as the Arabs like to call it, the Nakba, right? They call it a disaster that Israel was established. The leader of Israel at this time is David Ben-Gurion. Ben-Gurion is no right-winger. He's no hardcore right-winger. Ben-Gurion was a labor socialist. Ben-Gurion was very much in favor of a wide variety of negotiations. He was quite anti-religious in sort of his own persona, but he understood the necessity of there being a Jewish state.
Interesting. Okay, you know what? Actually, I'm gonna pause it here. Like I said, this is gonna be a bit of a longer video, plus with the intro, you know. So this would be part 1 of the history lesson with Ben Shapiro, and stay tuned for part 2. All right, thanks, guys.